Okay, so welcome to my live streaming of my podcast tonight. Trying some new things out. Mostly a better camera, a better way to actually live stream using YouTube. Um, and actually, right now, I'm just waiting for it to start. And it's not actually starting. So, already encountering a problem. Clearly says that I am indeed doing it. Okay, so, hmm. Okay. Cool. Stream could not be created. So this is already an issue. I have to start and stop. Mm-hmm. All right. Just bear with me, everyone. Okay, well, I'm watching it, so obviously I'm going to be able to share this, but it doesn't share. Okay, so I'm just going to move on because it says that it's gone. So we'll see what happens. Shows that's recording. So haven't actually. I need someone to remind me before I actually start live streaming and doing my podcast. That is really bright. Let me bring that down a little bit. There we go. Okay. And this is part of my preparation for getting for putting the podcast up. Kind of hem and haw around until I actually really get going. Trying to find a good balance here. Every time I find a new balance, it brightens up. But what my podcast is going to be tonight is actually on the Constitution. And that is why the name of my podcast is actually going to be The Constitution Isn't That Hard. But there's a few things I need to research before I actually get started, despite what you may think. Um, Even though I do most of it unscripted, I don't do it without at least a little prep time on it. So right now, if you're looking in the bottom corner of my screen, you see that I'm looking at something. Because one of the first things I'm going to talk about is that there's two basic camps of looking at the Constitution. There's one camp that believes it is a living Constitution, and some that don't think it is a living Constitution, that it's more static. But I don't think static is the right word. And so right off the bat, it's going to be a little bit quiet as I go through this. So I think the term I'm going to go with is static or fixed. Static or fixed versus the living document argument. So phone always buzzing. Always buzzing. Let me try something real quick because I don't. This could be a complete live streaming waste, which is why I'm doing this right now, because I am planning on live streaming the inauguration. Just want to make sure I have all my P's and Q's set. And just to make sure, I'm going to check one more time. It's kind of what you do. And it looks like it's a little delayed. So I'm just going to leave on because it says that it's gone. So see what happens. Perhaps I can find ways to move. That's not up yet. Oh, frustrating. Okay, so it appears to be working. So I'm just going to move on with what I'm doing and turn that off. I want to have the Constitution as I go through this, and basically what I'm going to do tonight, and I'll put it in my podcast, is I'm not going through the whole Constitution. I could do that, but it would take more than just one episode, one more than just one section. Okay, so I think I'm about ready to go. And maybe it's, who knows. Ready to go. Okay. Okay. And away we go. And move some things. Sorry for the noise you're about to hear as I get my microphone set in position so it's not so far away. Good evening, forecasters. This is Michael Hendricks coming to you on January 18th. Brand new podcast. Now, the podcast tonight is, if I remember correctly, is called "The Constitution Isn't Difficult." Now, you may be a little bit lucky this week, as I just recently did a podcast on Sunday. I'm doing a podcast today. Then I'll be doing a live stream podcast of the inauguration on Wednesday, followed with another podcast this weekend. So we may get 4 podcasts in a little bit over a week's time. But what I'm going to talk about tonight is the Constitution. Because, I've been hearing for a long time, really, but really just within the last couple of weeks, some just infuriating comments about the Constitution by people who clearly don't have a working knowledge of the Constitution. So I thought tonight what I might do is just do a brief run through of the Constitution, talk about different things of how the Constitution is interpreted and how it has been interpreted over the 200 years since its inception, but really to talk about those people who want to use the Constitution in just nefarious ways to attempt to basically change the government of the United States. And, I'm talking mostly about those on the right side of the political spectrum, like Ted Cruz, Lauren Boebert, Representative Green, and quite a few others, Hawley from Missouri, who have got, in my opinion, a completely perverted idea of what the Constitution is and what it actually does. And what this really comes from is this idea that the Constitution, specifically the First Amendment part of that talks about freedom of speech, that the First Amendment somehow protects you from being thrown off of social media sites for saying ridiculous, seditionist, racist things without any consequences. And that's not how that amendment works. But I will get to that in due time. Because there are some things I want to go over with the Constitution in real brief, just to give an idea of the Constitution. Now, I do have a master's degree in U.S. history. I did put my focus on early American history, so I have studied the Constitution quite extensively. I'm no expert by any means. There are those out there that know more about it than I do. This is purely my opinion. But first, before we actually go into the Constitution before we talk about any of the articles and sections, and the Bill of Rights, and then the other 17 amendments after that. One thing to keep in mind is that the Bill of Rights only covers the first 10 amendments. It does not cover any of the amendments after that. I may have to go to a different page as I'm looking at it. Actually go over. Okay. But one of the first things you really need to know about the Constitution, and those specifically who have opinions of the Constitution of how it works, there is that group. There's a group that believes the Constitution is a living, breathing document, and then there is the camp that believes that the Constitution is static or fixed. I fall into the latter category. I believe that the Constitution is static and fixed. I'll get more into that briefly. But those who believe that it is a living, breathing document believe that you can look at the Constitution as it was written in 1780 and still apply it, all of it, to everyday society now. That you can interpret it the way that it was written then to work into situations today. Those on the static or fixed side kind of look at that as these people, lawmakers mostly, that are basically saying, we're going to look at the Constitution and then just kind of make up our own minds about what the Constitution is saying. For me, there is a reason why there are amendments to the Constitution and why the founders put amendments to the Constitution, because it is not a living, breathing document. It is fixed, it is static, and you need to amend it to make it relevant to the time that you're in. That's why they put this process in. So that's the approach that I'm going to be looking at tonight, is from the static, fixed reading of the Constitution, because that's what I believe the Constitution is, and that's why we have the amendments. So I'm going to take a quick break, and then we'll come back and go over the first article of the Constitution. Well, we'll see how it goes. My plan is to mostly focus on the first article, and the first, second, and third article. Look real briefly at the other articles, see if we really need to spend any time on that. And then my last piece will be on the rights, not the entire 27 amendments, because it's not really relevant to what we're discussing at this point. So hang with me, and I'll be right back. All right, so once again, we go through the process, letting the first segment process so that I can put it into this is weird. I mean, it shows that it's not streaming, but it clearly is. So I'm going to be working in two different ways on this, trying to figure out why it says that it's not. I mean, it even shows that I'm live. So it's very weird. So I guess I'm going to have to look at it this way and just hope that it does, go through the process so I can post it later so people can watch it who aren't able to watch it tonight. And for those who are watching or who watch this at a later date, feel free to, subscribe. Hit subscribe down at the bottom to subscribe to the channel. And that way you'll get the updates as they come when I do go live. Now, I do plan on going live on every time that I do a podcast. I just like going through the process, and if people want to watch, then that's what they want to do. So, do this. I realized the other night after I did one of my podcasts that you could hear every click on my mouse in the podcast. So I'm hoping by putting my microphone over here tonight instead of over my mouse, that it'll make it less audible. Just give me a second. Okay, so I'm just asking for a little help to make sure that I am live streaming at this point. All right, ready for the second segment. All right, so when we look at the Constitution, of course, we need to start at the beginning with the preamble, which states that we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. Now, there is one important piece in that. I mean, the whole preamble is important. But this is really for those who say that it's unconstitutional somehow to provide health care to all Americans. Well, it's right there in the preamble where the United States, the federal government, promotes the general welfare of the people. That to me, it is pretty simple. So here we go. Article 1, Section 1. All legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and House of Representatives. It sets up the two different bodies of the legislative branch. And this is Article 1. So the founders, when they were writing the Constitution, felt that the legislative branch was the most important branch. You got to remember, these are the same men who wrote the Articles of Confederation. And in the Articles of Confederation, there wasn't even a president. So they wanted to make sure that the legislative branch was still essentially the most important piece of the federal government. Their main thing was adding in a president and reorganizing the government to where there was more of a central power. In the Articles of Confederation, there was no central power. The states acted almost as individual countries, independent countries. The Constitution does completely away with that. So, Section 2, the House of Representatives shall be composed of members chosen every second year by the people of the several states, and the electors in each state shall have the qualifications requisite for electors of the most numerous branch of the state legislature. No person shall be a representative who shall not have attained the age of 25 years and been 70 years a citizen of the United States, and who shall not, when elected, be an inhabitant of the state in which he, she, shall be chosen. And I apologize for the dog outside barking. Can't really do anything about that. So here with the House of Representatives set up, every member of the House has to run every 2 years. It's not like the Senate, which I'll get to here in just a second, but every 2 years, every member has to run for election or re-election. Now, this is the people's house. from the very beginning, it was decided that the people in the states would decide who their representatives would be. Section 3, this is the creation of the Senate. The Senate of the United States shall be composed of 2 senators from each state, chosen by the legislature thereof for 6 years, and each senator shall have 1 vote. Now, we know that's not the way it's done anymore. Amendment Amendment 17, which was ratified in 1913, actually took that power away from the state legislatures, and it determined that that the people in the states would actually select the senators and not the state legislatures. So this was superseded by that amendment. So immediately after they shall be assembled, in consequence of the first elections, they shall be divided as equally as may be into 3 classes. The seats of the senators of the first class shall be vacated at the expiration of the second year of the second class, at the expiration of the 4th year, and the third class at the expiration of the 6th year. So the 1/3 may be chosen every second year. And basically what this sets up, and you see it in the third class with the expiration of the 6th year, is that when a senator is elected into the Senate, they serve for 6 years. But there's 3 different classes of senators. So the way it works is that with all 100 senators, they're elected every 6 years, but because of the way they did this, there is a Senate election every 2 years. No person shall be a senator who shall not have attained to the age of 30 years and been 9 years a citizen of the United States, who shall not, when elected, be an inhabitant of that state for which he shall be chosen. The Vice President, this is very important to me, the Vice President of the United States shall be President of the Senate, but shall have no vote unless they be equally divided. And this is why we are about to see when Joe Biden and Kamala Harris become president and vice president, Kamala Harris will become the president of the Senate. And because there is a 50-50 tie in the Senate, the Democrats will hold power in the Senate. However, Kamala Harris will never vote unless there is a 50-50 tie. Section 4, not really important. Section 6 is about compensation. Section 7 is about raising revenue. It just states that it shall be originate in the House of Representatives, but the Senate may propose or concur with amendments as on other bills. Here's a fun thing for those who believe that we are being taxed without us giving our consent. The consent is in the Constitution. The Congress, Section 8, the Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises, to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. But all duties, imposts, and excises shall be uniform throughout the United States. So right there in Section 8, Article 1, Congress is given the power to collect taxes. They're also, once again, directed to provide for the common defense and the general welfare of the United States. That's the main thing with the first section, or the first article, is setting up Congress, setting up the 2 houses, setting up how they're elected, the House of Representatives is the House of the people. The Senate, at one point, was elected by the legislature. And this is where, for me, it goes to prove that it is not a living, breathing document, that it is, in fact, static. because they did have to come back in and pass a new amendment just to change the Constitution to state that the Senate shall be elected by the people of the state instead of the legislature. If it was a living, breathing document, there would have been no need for that. So that's Article 1. I'm going to move on to Article 2 here in just a moment. All right. So I'm going to move on to Article 2. I'm not going to spend as much time on Article 2 and Article 3. I really want to get to the amendments part. That's the gist of my argument, that it is a static document, and the amendments show that. Well, this is processing. I'm just looking through what I want to actually talk about. Okay, there isn't too much to talk about it in that. Okay. Okay, so, alright, record again. And 3. No, take a drink first. Cheers. Alright. 3, 2, 1. Alright, so we're going to move on to Article 2 of the Constitution, and I'm not going to spend as much time on Article 2 as I did on Article 1, but Article 2 is the formation of the executive branch. Section 1 states, the executive power shall be vested in a President of the United States of America. He or she shall hold his office during, or hers, office during the term of 4 years, and together with a vice president chosen for the same term be elected as follows. Each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct a number of electors equal to the whole number of senators and representatives to which the state may be entitled in the Congress, but no senator or representative or person holding office of trust or profit under the United States shall be an appointed elect. This is the Electoral College where it is set out. This is about the only piece of the Electoral College that still exists within the actual Constitution that has not been changed with amendments. But basically what that part says, which is odd that it was put here, is this sets up the Electoral College. Has to be equal to the number of senators and representatives. So in the case we are right now, we're at 538 when you combine the senators and representatives, but no senator or representative or any person holding office can be appointed an elector. I'm not going to read you, I don't know if you can see it on your screen. I'm not going to read you the blue part because that's been completely amended. Here's an important part from me. It says, no person except a natural-born citizen or a citizen of the United States at the time of the adoption of this Constitution shall be eligible to the office of President. Neither shall any person be eligible to that office who shall not have attained to the age of 35 years and been 14 years a resident within the United States. So this has always been a confusing piece because it has been felt, even to this day, that paragraph is in effect stating that no one that isn't born in the United States, that isn't a natural born citizen, can be president of the United States. With my reading of it, that's not really what it says at all. Um, what it says, I just realized I'm doing a podcast right now. No person except a natural born citizen or a citizen of the United States at the time of the adoption of this Constitution. And then it goes on down to says, and it has been 14 years a resident within the United States. I believe that the reason they put this in here was to make sure that someone from Britain couldn't come over and become president. But it doesn't necessarily mean that no one not born in the United States could ever serve as president. This is what the racists and bigots have tried to argue with Obama and now with Kamala Harris, because they don't believe they were born in the United States, even though both of them were. And there have been interpretations onto this. That's why really John McCain was able to run for president, because he was not born in the United States. He was not a natural born citizen. He was born on a Navy base in Panama. So that's one of those that's going to be up for debate for a very long time. There's another part here about the case of removal of a president from office. That's been superseded by the Constitution as well, or by amendments. And then here's the following oath or affirmation that the president must take on their inauguration day. Simply states, "I do solemnly swear or affirm." It's up to them how they say it. That I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. Note that it says Constitution. It doesn't mention any religious text. It's the Constitution. He shall have, this is in section 2, he shall have power by and with the advice of the consent of the Senate to make treaties, provided 2/3 of the senators present. The president shall have the power to fill up vacancies that may happen during the recess of the Senate by granting commissions, which shall expire at the end of their next session. This is something Obama actually was pushed back on, is that because he knew the Senate would not confirm his appointees, he would just wait until the Senate went on recess and then appoint someone. But the Constitution is fairly clear that their appointment would end at the next session. And then here's the most vague piece of Article 2. It's in Section 4. The President, Vice President, and all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. Now, we've never had a president impeached on treason or bribery. What all the presidents who have been impeached for high crimes and misdemeanors, because it does not specifically state in the Constitution or any of the amendments what exactly constitutes a high crime or misdemeanor. All right, so that is it for the president that I'm going to talk about at this point. I'm going to move on to the judicial branch right after this. And let's see how I can share this. So I'm going to let that process. I didn't need that. I think that's actually what I wanted to do. Messages. Okay. Oh, that processed rather quickly. And right now, ladies and gentlemen, and I'll say this again I'll say this on my podcast. I'm just basically running through the Constitution right now. I'm not really going to have full discussion until I've gotten through the Constitution. But there is one thing I need to do when I go back live, and that is do a little shout out. All right, here we go. And my microphone not plugged in. I know you can hear me because that's the computer. Unplug the wrong thing. So I'm gonna make a switch. I don't know if it's gonna be. Sometimes when you're live and speaking into a microphone that's dead. Okay. So, okay. So I'm still recording. Okay. Um. Well, I can. I don't really know how to change that. Check your equipment. Check your equipment before you actually start. All right. Where's the tuner? Okay. So starting in 3, 2, 1. All right, forecasters. Before I move on to the Article 3, which is the judicial branch, which I don't know why I struggle to say judicial, but I always have. I just want to give a quick shout out to my brother Will Hendricks and my friend Doug Murray, who have their own podcast on Anchor. It is called Off the Rails with Doug and Will. Very funny show. I listen to it every time they actually do podcasts. They took about a month off. No specified reason why they took that month off. Just from their last episode, they were both doing absolutely nothing, busily getting their podcast ready to go. But I do just want to get out a shout out to both of those gentlemen for promoting my podcast on their podcast. So this is me at this point promoting their podcast, again, Off the Rails with Doug and Will. You can find it on anchor.fm. You can also find it on just about any streaming service available, any podcast available. I switch between my iPad and Spotify to listen to them and listen to myself because I do like the way my voice sounds. Thank you. But moving on to Article 3 of the Constitution. Article 3 sets up the judicial branch. Section 1 states that the judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court and in such inferior courts as the Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. The judges both of the Supreme and inferior courts shall hold their offices during good behavior and shall at stated times receive for their services a compensation which will not be diminished during their continuance in office. In Section 2, shall in all cases in law and equity arising under this Constitution, the law of the United States, and treaties made shall be made under their authority to all cases affecting ambassadors, other public ministers, and consuls. It's boring, isn't it? It doesn't matter. It's just talking about what kind of cases they're going to hear. Excuse me. Section 3 states treason against the United States shall consist only in levying war against them or in adhering to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort. No person shall be convicted of treason unless on the testimony of 2 witnesses to the same overt act or on confession in open court. The Congress shall have power to declare the punishment of treason, but no attainder of treason shall work corruption of blood or forfeiture except during the life of the person attained. Yikes, right? So it is, and this is, says the judges both of the, this is back to section 1, the judges both of the Supreme and inferior courts shall hold their offices during good behavior. So what does that mean? That means they get to serve on the bench for the rest of their life if they behave good. But one thing in these 3 sections, this is going to be a lot shorter than I thought it was. I may just move on to the next article. What it does not state is how many judges are on the Supreme Court. It was never set in the Constitution. It was never set in the amendments. So that's why the number changed for quite a while, up until the late 1800s when it was set at 9. When Washington was president, I'm not going to give a full rundown of how the seats changed, but when Washington was president, it was 3. He set it at 3. And then it slowly inched its way up to 9. So Congress, the Senate, does have the ability to add or subtract seats as they see fit. I'm not against adding seats or subtracting seats at all, unless the states want to pass an amendment that needs 3/4 of the states to do that. If they want to pass an amendment that sets that 9, they're more than they're more than welcome to do so. But until that is done, the Senate has the ability to set the number at what they want. The last time that it was brought up was actually during Franklin Roosevelt's presidency when he wanted to up it, and the Senate said thanks, but no thanks. Article 4. Nothing all that important that anyone really argues about. Okay, Article 5. Moving on to Article 5. The Congress, whenever 2/3 of both houses shall deem it necessary. Sometimes you gotta make sure you're recording. Yeah. Okay. Shall propose amendments to this Constitution or on the application of the legislatures of 2/3 of the several states. See, that's my mistake. I thought it was 3/4. It is 2/3. Shall call a convention for proposing amendments, which, in either case, shall be valid to all intents and purposes as part of this Constitution when ratified by the legislatures of 3/4 of the several states. Okay, I'm going to try this part again because I've royally screwed up Article 5. And I apologize to my podcast listeners as I make a correction in the middle of my podcast. So let's try this again without any comments from me. Article 5. The Congress, whenever 2/3 of both houses shall deem it necessary, shall propose amendments to this Constitution, or, on the application of the legislatures of 2/3 of the several states, shall call a convention for proposing amendments, which, in either case, shall be valid to all intents and purposes as part of this Constitution, when ratified by the legislatures of 3/4 of the several states, or by conventions in 3/4 thereof, as the one or the other mode of ratification may be proposed by the Congress, provided that no amendment which may be made prior to the year 1808, 1808, shall in any manner affect the first and fourth clauses of the 9th section of the first article, and that no state, without its consent, shall be deprived of its equal suffrage in the Senate. So, it's a lot of words. What is it saying? What it's saying is that the amendment process is very difficult. You need 2/3 of Congress, 3/4 of the states, but there's a very specific reason why they mention 1808. And it has, as it always does, as the Constitution does, which I apologize, this is the first time I'm mentioning this, especially on Martin Luther King Day. It has everything to do with slavery. This particular point was put in so that Congress couldn't come back in that 20-year gap, basically, almost 30-year gap, and put in an amendment that gave complete freedom to the slaves in the southern states. That is the only way the southern states would ratify the Constitution, is that that language and other language was put in there. Look at the other articles. All right, Article 7, the final article. The ratification of the conventions of 9 states shall be sufficient for the establishment of this Constitution between the states, so ratifying the same. The word "the" being interlined between the 7th and this is a really interesting part where they're talking about ratification of the Constitution. They actually take time out to basically explain that there's parts of the Constitution when it was being written that they kind of screwed up. The word "the" being interlined between the 7th and 8th lines of the first page. The word "30" being partly written on an erasure in the 15th line of the first page. The words "is tried" being interlined between the 32nd and 33rd lines of the first page of the word. "The" being interlined. It's amazing. So we have the signatories. So that's the Constitution in a nutshell. Again, I've missed something somewhere. So I'm going to take a quick break on my podcast because I need to. And then we'll come back, discuss anything that I missed that I need to go back over. And then I'm going to talk about the amendments. So I've missed the 3/5 compromise. So I need to go back and find it. Because that's a very important part. I read it. All right, well, there it is. I missed it because it's been struck from the Constitution, and so it was in blue. And as I've stated toward at another point in my podcast, that I wasn't going over the blue parts because they were no longer in the Constitution. So that's come on. Okay. Okay. So interesting fact, which I will talk about. In the podcast, is they originally were going to do 12 amendments. There were going to originally be 12 amendments that made up the Bill of Rights. And I'll go over those because that's going to be the main part of this discussion. Because Bill of Rights, I feel, is the most misrepresented else in the Constitution. Okay, so getting ready to go live, or not live, I'm already live. Getting ready to go back into the podcast. Take a little drink. Not alcoholic, of course. That hit me good. All right, and starting back in 3, 2, 1. All right, welcome back. And I realized what I'd left off was the 3/5 clause in the Constitution. This is Article 1. This was in Article 1, Section 2. And this is another reason why I am very much on the side of the Constitution being a static or fixed Constitution. Because if it was a living, breathing document, you could have just passed some laws and just completely ignored this section of the Constitution. But it took an amendment to actually get rid of it. But it is Article 1, Section 2, in the third paragraph. Representatives and direct taxes shall be apportioned among the several states, which may include, try that again. Representatives and direct taxes shall be apportioned among the several states, which may be included within this union according to the respective numbers, which shall be determined by adding to the whole number of free persons, including those bound to service for a term of years, indentured servants, and excluding Indians not taxed, 3/5 of all other persons. The actual enumeration shall be made within 3 years after the first meeting of the Congress. That's when we had our first census of the United States, and with every subsequent term of 10 years, in such manner as they shall by law direct. The number of representatives shall not exceed 1 for every 30,000, but each state shall have at least 1 representative, and until such enumeration shall be made, the state of New Hampshire shall be entitled to choose 3, Massachusetts 8, Rhode Island and Providence Plantations 1, Connecticut, that's what Rhode Island was originally called, Rhode Island and Providence Plantations, Connecticut 5, New York 6, New Jersey 4, Pennsylvania 8, Delaware 1, Maryland 6, Virginia 10, North Carolina 5, South Carolina 5, and Georgia 3. So, once again, going back to slavery, it was written in the Constitution of these United States that those people in slavery, black people, were only considered to be 3/5 of a free person. And then people wonder why we still have racism to this day. I really can't explain it any better than the fact that they put in the Constitution that a black person who was a slave was only worth 3/5 of a free person. And the fact they didn't even include Indians at all. But hey, what do I know? So, on to the Bill of Rights. This is where I'm going to focus most of my conversation tonight on my podcast, because I do believe a lot of the confusion, I guess, or the ignorance of the Constitution comes from the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments. But here's something you may not know. The original plan, when they held a joint resolution of Congress to propose the Bill of Rights, was to have 12 amendments. The First Amendment the First Amendment was just how many representatives there would be. Was that there shall be not less than 100 representatives based on the population, nor less than 1 representative for every 40,000 persons, until the number of representatives shall amount to 200. So that was the original number that they were going to break the House of Representatives Act, was 200. After which the proportion shall be so regulated by Congress that it shall not be less than 200 representatives, no more than 1 representative for every 50,000 persons. So as we go up by 100, the original plan was, once we hit 200 and 300 and 400, is that the representative would represent more and more people. So it doesn't really state it, but you can kind of guess that once they hit 300 representatives, 1 representative would represent 60,000 people. The original Second Amendment was supposed to be that no law varying the compensation of the services of the senators and representatives shall take effect until an election of representatives shall have intervened. Blah. So those two were thrown out. They never made it. So the original 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th, and 11th, and 12th became the first 10 amendments. So Amendment 1, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or the press, or the right of the people peacefully to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. This goes right into what's going on today with several very prominent, very far-right conservatives claiming that every time their tweets on Twitter, or their birdies, if you will, or their post on Facebook, or their post on Instagram, or any of the other social media websites, when they're taken down and removed because they're just so awful, racist, insurrectionist, that their freedom of speech is being violated. And it's not. It simply is not. And I'm sorry I keep rubbing my nose for those watching, but it itches. The First Amendment protects your freedom of speech from being abridged by the federal government or by Congress. Does not protect your First Amendment freedom of speech from a private or public company. If we want to parse words on that, and I have seen them parse words on that. Every social media site out there has a term of service or terms of use, and if you violate those terms, they can and they will kick you off their site. They have the freedom to do that. Sorry to tell you that, but they do. So, is it censorship? Maybe. But that's a completely different argument. Has nothing to do with the Constitution. Stop this. And then, of course, the press has the freedom, right, of people to peacefully assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. Those two, in my opinion, go hand in hand. And then, of course, no law respecting the establishment of religion. I don't care how many times you say it, this is not a Christian nation. It is not. It makes it perfectly clear in the First Amendment that Congress, the federal government, shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, also very important, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Now, for many, and I am one of those included, the fact that it says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion means that if you work for the government, and yes, that does include education, you can't go in front of your class and preach religion to them. If you're going to teach religion, that's cool, but you got to teach all religions, prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Now, I'm going to take a quick break on this, talk about some of the other amendments, and to kind of give my closing thought on all of this. So stick with me. I've got to remember, those who are watching my live stream, that I can't suddenly make a change when I'm podcasting, because they can't see what I'm doing. But I am going to switch my screen. This, if it'll let me. There it is. And then exit that one. There we go. Alright. move that right now. Interesting. Let's just finish this up. Not exactly working the way I want it to. Okay. All right, back to this. Hey, maybe I don't think I'm doing too much, but let me know if you think I'm doing too much and it's causing me to have some issues. All right. Okay. Hopefully that fixes the issue. Let's just stop sharing altogether. Back to this. And I don't see it. Okay, that's weird. I don't know what I've done, but that's something else. Okay, so I'll just go back to normal. Okay. Yeah, at this point, I want to get finished. This live stream is not going so well. I apologize to anyone watching on YouTube. I'll get these issues fixed. All right, and so we're going to discuss a couple more amendments. And again, going back to my original argument all the way back in the beginning of this, that the Constitution is fixed or static. Because if it were a living document, there would be absolutely no need for these amendments. But we have them because we have to make changes to them. And what's funny is that Marsha Blackburn, who is a senator from Tennessee, who, by the way, voted to overturn the election, to side with the insurrectionist, tweeted out at some point that we will never change the Constitution. Apparently, she is completely unaware that the Constitution has been changed 27 times, which I don't know personally. If you're working for the federal government as a senator, that's something you should probably know. But that's just my aside. That's just a tangent that I decided to go off on. So the Second Amendment. This is an amendment that I've had many arguments over, and I will tell you my feelings, my belief on it, and I will stick to this. I haven't changed my mind on this in about 20 years. Probably not going to do it anytime soon. Amendment 2 says, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now, what you hear a lot from people who apparently don't care about anything else that's in the Constitution or in the Bill of Rights or the other 17 amendments, whenever they talk about the Second Amendment, they always start from the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. They're leaving off an entire section of the amendment when they do that. is right off the bat. It says a well-regulated militia, comma, being necessary to the security of a free state, comma, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So if you want to rearrange these words to make it make a little more sense in 21st century United States, I've done this before and I've lost it now. You could rewrite it in this fashion: the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, being necessary to the security of a free state and a well-regulated militia. The Second Amendment was put in place simply to make sure that state militias were armed, that they could actually protect their states. Now, we don't have any true militias anymore. We have the far-right loonies who form their own militias, but they're not true militias by any sense of imagination. The closest we come to a militia in the current United States is the National Guard that was put in place to protect each state. Amendment 2 was never meant, in my opinion, of everything that I've read about it at the time that it was written, it was never meant for you and me to keep and bear arms. It was meant for the militia, and again, it goes back to slavery, specifically in Virginia, because militia in Virginia was mostly around to capture escaped slaves. Another reason for the inclusion of the Second Amendment and to make sure that the militia was armed was also to train it. That's the first part of that amendment that says a well-regulated militia. It had to be trained. So, they did write it very vague, because really I think what was meant, from what I've read of the founders at the time, is that it really was meant to say a well-regulated militia that is necessary to the security of a free state must have the right for its people to keep and bear arms. But this is an argument that will never end. When I do have this argument, discussion, debate, whatever you want to call it, they will say, well, look at the Supreme Court and all the decisions they've made. Well, the Supreme Court has made incorrect decisions in the past. If you don't believe me, look at any person who thinks that Roe v. Wade was a mistake by the Supreme Court. Supreme Court isn't always correct, ladies and gentlemen. Amendment 3, at this point, Amendment 3 should probably be, we need to pass a 28th Amendment just to get rid of the Third Amendment, because it says no soldier shall in time of peace be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in the time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by laws. And it's no longer even necessary. It was mostly to make sure that the British didn't take over homes. And then the other important part of the Bill of Rights are the last two amendments, Amendment 9 and Amendment 10. Amendment 9 states that the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. That's not the one I wanted. I believe it's the 10th and 11th. Okay. Oh, maybe I was reading the wrong. I don't know. But Amendment 9 states the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. So Amendment 9 says basically any laws that are not specifically stated in the Constitution or its amendments shall go to the people. Then Amendment 10 states the power is not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states or reserved to the states respectively or the people. So, all that's really saying, ladies and gentlemen, in Amendments 9 and 10 are any laws not prescribed by the Constitution, its amendments, or the Congress shall go to the people and its states. Nowhere in these two amendments does it say that state laws or people have more rights than the federal government prescribes. It just doesn't. There was an argument made after the Civil War, that the South had a right to secede from the United States to protect their 10th Amendment. But the Civil War was never about states' rights. It was about slavery. Full stop. So I'm going to take another brief break, and then I'm going to come back and close all this up with my final thoughts. So I hope you're getting some of this while I fumble through the live streaming issue that I'm having. It still says it's live. I'm just going to have to trust that it is at this point. Just waiting for that to process. I'm not going to put any music to it this time except for my intro and outro. But I hope my ultimate goal with this is obviously to give you my opinion of the Constitution, but to kind of drag you in to thinking about the Constitution on your own. Because the Constitution, to go back to the name of this episode, it's not difficult. It's black and white. Where the issue, hang on, I'm naming this segment. Okay. And I'll just say this on my podcast, so I don't have to say it a second time. So, getting ready in 3, 2, 1. All right. So, the main idea behind this podcast tonight, I kind of had two different reasons for doing this. I wanted to test out the live streaming on YouTube, using a different feature with YouTube, do picture in picture and all that. I think it's working. I've heard it's working. I've seen it working, but YouTube is still showing me that it's not working. So we'll see after this whether or not it shows up in my channel. But the other reason I did this is because I wanted to share my opinion of the Constitution. But I also wanted you to think about the Constitution. Because at the end of the day, that's the reason why I named this episode what it is. The Constitution isn't difficult. It is right there in black and white. Most of it, without exception, is not really all that vague. But the issue comes in are on the parts that are vague. And we've had arguments over it for 240 years now about those vague pieces. And I just want to say one more thing about the Second Amendment, and why I believe we need a new amendment to basically clarify the Second Amendment. And if you think, well, why do we need to do that? We have laws. Well, very famously in the 1900s, we passed an amendment in this country that banned alcohol sales and drinking. And then we had to pass another amendment a few years later to strike that amendment out. So we can't just do it with lives because, again, the Constitution is static and fixed. We need amendments to change the Constitution. we need amendments to amend amendments. It's a lot of amendments right there. But there is no way that anyone can convince me that when the founders wrote the Constitution, let's play devil's advocate with this. Let's say that they did write the Second Amendment and meant for every man, woman, and child to have a gun. There is no way in 1780, 1780, that they could have ever envisioned the types of guns that we have today. And I don't believe for one second that if you transported the founding fathers into today's society, never mind all the different things that would probably give them a stroke or heart attack or kill them right on the spot, if you showed them the kind of guns that we have today before they wrote the Second Amendment, they probably never would have written the Second Amendment or would have made it a lot more clear. Because there's just no way that they ever envisioned that I could go into a gun store and buy a weapon specifically designed for warfare and then argue that it was my right to have it because I was going to use it to protect myself. Weapons of war are not designed for defense. They are designed to kill. That is their sole purpose for existing. But really, I wanted to get back to the main point of this. I wanted to offer my thoughts on the Constitution. Because right now we are living in a crazy time where we have people sitting in Congress that are describing themselves as constitutional scholars. And I don't have any doubt in my mind that they have probably never read the Constitution. Or they just stuck to the Second Amendment of the Constitution. That's why I am in full belief that any senator, any congressman or woman, and yes, the President of the United States, if it is found that they had anything at all, to do with the insurrection on January 6th, they should immediately, once that evidence is found, they should be immediately thrown out of office and immediately charged with insurrection. Because if they're not, all it's doing is telling their cult, their flock, that they can do it again without recrimination. If we want to be a constitutional government, we've got to follow our Constitution. Otherwise, it's not worth the paper that it is written on. Again, these are my thoughts. These are my beliefs after studying the Constitution for 20 some odd years at this point. The inauguration is on Wednesday. And I personally can't wait just to have an adult in the White House again. I personally can't wait to have the first woman ever to serve as vice president in this country. It's couldn't find a hole. That's what she said. It's going to be a long road to get back to any sense of normalcy. Because President-elect Biden, who will become the 46th president of the United States on Wednesday at noon, he has a lot to do. Because we just went through 4 years of our federal government absolutely breaking down. So there's a lot for him to do, and he is going to fail on certain things. It's going to happen. Above all else, I mean, I'm a Democrat, I'm a liberal, I'm a progressive, but above all else, I am a realist. He's not going to succeed on everything. There are things he's probably going to do that I'm not going to like. And in 4 years, God willing, if he runs for president again, he's done enough that I just didn't like. I will look to vote for someone else. Because that's how democracy works in this country. Free and fair elections. Free of fraud. No cheating. Whoever wins, wins. Don't go through 63 cases without showing any evidence of fraud or cheating. We don't hold up the certification of the Electoral College in Congress because we're upset that the person we thought should have won didn't win. And we certainly do not storm the Capitol because we're upset that our candidate didn't win. Protest. Absolutely. Go out and protest. If you feel that Trump was cheated, go out and protest. I love protesting. I've never been to a protest, but I love watching a protest, hearing people throw their ideas out there of what they're protesting against. But what happened on the 6th was not a protest. It was an attempted overthrowing of the government. And it worked for several hours. As these morons and baboons and poor excuses for humans strolled through the halls of Congress, stole laptops, and one has now been accused of trying to sell Madam Speaker Pelosi's laptop to Russia. I mean, you can't make this up. But anyways, sorry I went off on a tangent. That's it for tonight. I hope you learned something about the Constitution. If not, get a copy of the Constitution for yourself. I have one on my phone. Get a paper version, just a little book that you can carry in your pocket that you can go back and look at. Look at what the founders said. There's plenty of documents out there from the founders about the Constitution. But as always, stay safe out there. Wear your mask when in public. Stay at least 6 feet away from other people if you can when you're in public. This is almost over. Well, the beginning is here. The beginning of the end is here. So, we've got this. Good night. All right, so that is my podcast. I felt, at the beginning, kind of struggled with it a little bit. As sometimes I do. I don't know what it is. Sometimes I struggle off the bat, but I found my pace. I found my speed, especially in that last segment. I'm just waiting for it to process. Then I need to add the intro and then the outro, some ads, and then I'll be done with the stream. And I'm just really hopeful. That that I'm able to go back and work on it. Add some cards to it for people to come back and watch. All right, last segment is going in. This is a long one. Right at an hour. I try to put my sponsor segment right in the middle because that's what they suggest to do. It's not right in the middle, but it's close enough. Now I just gotta find my intro and outro. And as always, as I'm going through this, I encourage any responses. Though it's gonna be gonna be rude about it. I'm probably not gonna respond to you. But always, right down below, click to subscribe if you happen upon this. I'll do this every time I'm doing a podcast. I think that's it. I'm not gonna put anything else in. Just short of an hour. Wow, not bad. So, all right. Oh yeah, I gotta. Um, I'll just need to write some things about it. All right, that's season 2, episode 4. I think it's 4. Yep, it is the 4th episode of season 2. On Wednesday will be the 5th episode. We'll see how that actually works out. I'm just going to be talking about the inauguration as I see it. On YouTube, it's basically going to be my first time to do a reaction video on YouTube. I hope it works a lot better than it seems to work tonight. And it's published. There we go. All right, so to those on my live stream, thank you for watching. If you're watching this at a later date, thank you for sticking through this. Again, click to subscribe. Go through the other videos. I also have another section within this that is actually a concert of a band from the 90s called Frustrated Cruelty. It was actually my older brother's band. Very poor quality because it was recorded on VHS in the mid 90s. But give it a shot, see what you think. But